All right. Shalom, shalom. I hope everybody here at Lighthouse is doing well. All right, here we go. So, shalom, everybody. Okay, tonight's topic is the concept of spirituality, understanding what it means and understanding what it means for us, and how essentially it opens the door for us living a life that is free in a certain way. Let's explain what I mean, right? Because what do we mean? What do we mean by spirituality? And my friends, feel free to chime in. I don't know if you guys can talk. If you need to be unmuted, I'm not quite sure what's going on with all that. But anyway, send in a chat, whatever it might be. So what we mean by spirituality, real quick, right? Oh, perfect, people can chat, awesome. So let's get into it, right? What are people's perception of spirituality? A lot of times, especially in the Western world, where most of us are from, we get the vibe that, you know, what spirituality means, like who's the spiritual person is like, you know, you think of someone who walks to the top of a mountain and maybe they have, maybe they got like, I don't know, long curly hair, a flowy skirt or something, and their wind is blowing and it just feels like they're just gonna float away into the, you know, into the clouds. However, what we find by Judaism is one of the words we have for God in Judaism is Hatzur, which means the rock. That doesn't sound too flowy, right? Because what we're saying is that the first thing we really mean when we talk about spirituality is the ability to make a choice, to have a certain way of being, to know who we are, and to choose that beyond whatever is going on in that particular moment, right? So let me give you an example of what I mean, right? And we'll come back to spirituality in a minute. Let's talk a minute about freedom, right? If I were to ask your average Joe on the street, what do we mean by freedom? What's gut response that you guys could put it in the chat? Gut response. So if I were to ask people on the street, what do we mean by freedom? What is the gut response that people might tell me? What are some answers that people might give? Go ahead, let's see, send something in the chat. We'll make this a little interactive. There you go, make your own choices. Arya Wolf, what's up? Anybody else want to chime in? All right, so usually most people, the gut response is freedom means I'm going to be free to do what I want, when I want, right? I'm free to do what I want, when I want. Thing is though, is this really the case? There you go, constitutional rights, right? Which, what does constitutional rights mean? A lot of times it means essentially that like, okay, no one's going to come in from the outside in order to, you know, a lot of those rights were established based off the backdrop of tyranny, right? So usually that's what people are talking about. So let's take a look though, and we'll be able to, let's see if this really holds true, right? Because certainly this is a level of freedom, but let's see how this works out, right? I'll tell you a little story. And well, this story involves a friend of my wife. We'll call her Rebecca because that's her name. And Rebecca was about 11 years old when she heard about this cool thing called smoking. And she figured she's got to give it a try. So sure enough, Rebecca at age 11 found her way to a cigarette. And she smoked a cigarette. So what do you think, my friends? Do you think she enjoyed that experience, that first cigarette? Do you think she enjoyed that? Yes or no? That is correct. The answer is no. She did not enjoy that experience. Yet, Rebecca at the young age of 11 had the wisdom and maturity to know that the finer tastes in life need to be acquired over time. So sure enough, Rebecca continues to find her way to cigarettes. And now fast forward 20 years later, Rebecca has gone from someone taking their first cigarette to a smoker. So what do you think over the last 20 years, Has Rebecca tried to quit from time to time? What do you think? Yes, yes, she has. She's had this. She's tried to quit time to time. We know what they say about quitting smoking. Quitting smoking is easy. Every smoker does it at least once a month, right? So, sure enough, Rebecca has tried to quit, but here she is, 20 years later, still smoker. So now, when she goes ahead and nowadays, when she goes ahead and takes that cigarette out and smokes that cigarette, would we say that that is an expression of her freedom? Arya Wolf says no. Anybody else? No, right. That's correct. Why? Because we know that she really wants to quit, right? The inner side of her, the higher side of her, is yearning to quit. But she hasn't been able to do that on a long-term basis. But there you go. She's trapped in the cigarette. There you go, right? But here's the thing, though. She is doing whatever she feels like doing whenever she feels like doing it, right? And so what it means is that the way we typically look, our gut response, like what's been programmed into us by society, what it means, freedom, there's a little bit of slavery wrapped up in there, right? If I'm always doing whatever I feel like doing, whenever I feel like doing it, so where is the assertion of the I? Where is the choice, as I think someone said at the beginning here, right? Right, if I'm just following whatever feeling, whatever inclination, whatever pops up in front of me, whatever people around me are doing, if I'm just doing whatever I feel like doing, whenever I feel like doing it, I'm a slave to that feeling. I'm a slave to that vibe. I'm a slave to that emotion, right? So let me show you another example, another smoking story, just to make my point here and to gain a little clarity. This one is a little more personal. This one is about my grandfather. My grandfather was late to the whole smoking thing. He waited to the old age of 15 or 16 to get started. And so my grandfather, as he was growing up, it was a time where, he had a whole personality, whole persona around the smoking thing, right? He had his smoking jacket. He had all the different pictures that he was taking with either with a pipe or a cigarette or something like this. Anyway, my grandfather gets older. He gets married. He has kids. He has a family. And so, what do you think? Do you think that they enjoyed the fact that he was smoking? No, they did not enjoy the fact that he was smoking. So anyway, though, time goes on. He gets a little bit older, and over time, my Uncle Elliot, he starts to enjoy and appreciate the taste of a fine cigar from time to time. So he kind of becomes my grandfather's default ally in the family when it comes to this whole smoking thing. But my grandfather gets older. His health ain't what it used to be. He's actually smoking a little bit more, and so the family is getting very worried. Until one day, there's my grandfather, and he's sitting at the table, and he's got his newspaper in one hand, and he's got his pipe in the other. And in walks Uncle Elliot. Uncle Elliot walks in, sits down right across from him. And he says to my grandfather, Dad, it's enough already. The smoking thing, your health ain't what it used to be. You're getting you've been smoking more lately. You ain't getting any younger. It's enough already. At that moment, my grandfather looks at my uncle, looks at the pipe, looks at my uncle, puts down the pipe, never picks it up again. After 40 years of smoking, quits on the spot. True story. Now, 90 seconds later, when my grandfather feels like picking up the pipe and having a puff, and he doesn't, would we say that that is an expression of his freedom? Yeah, there you go, right? But he's not doing whatever he feels like doing whenever he feels like doing it, right? And so what we see from this is that real freedom means the ability to free yourself from yourself to make a choice independent of where you're being pulled, the direction you're being pulled towards, right? Independent, whether that be a physical pull, whether that be an emotional pull, whether it be psychological, mental, whatever, right? And so the beginning, and this is the idea also, this is the beginning of spirituality, right? Because this is the assertion of the human spirit. The animal has a certain inclination, has a certain instinct. Motherly instincts also are instincts, right? And they're fine and good when used in the right way, of course, as all instincts are. But the idea is that when we go ahead and make a choice beyond the direction we're being pulled into, that is the assertion of the human spirit. That is where spirituality begins, right? And so that means that I can have a certain desire, a certain pre-programming, a certain emotional response that's pulling me towards one way. But if I can recognize, if I can kind of free myself from that, take a step back and decide I want to go in another path, or I want to live to a certain ideal, which entails me going in a different direction, that is assertion of humanhood, right? If I have a certain thing, if I have a certain nitiyah, a certain leaning towards sadness, depression, self-consciousness, insecurity, negativity, whatever it might be, right? And so something happens and I feel myself going in that direction. I decide, you know what? This doesn't serve me. Or, you know what? This is not the godly way that I want to be rolling with. Or I want to live to the higher side of myself. This is to the lower side of myself. And I go ahead and I extract myself from that. And I decide to choose towards a different direction, choose towards positivity, choose towards acting positive, even if in that moment I'm feeling like my negative is pulling me that way. And so a lot of people will say, hold on a second, if I do that, then I'm not being real, I'm not being true to myself. My question to that is, well, who are you? Are you negativity? Is that your name? Right? The only reason that you think that's you is because that's who you've been and that's what you've acted upon and that's the attributes that you've exuded up until this point, right? Or that was put into you when you were a kid, or maybe naturally you have a certain leaning towards that, but that's not you. What humanhood means, what the human spirit means, is that you can make a choice. Outside of that, the only reason why you haven't been Mr. Positive or Miss Positive is because you haven't been Miss Positive or Mr. Positive. Start doing that, and then that will become you, right? How many of us have a certain role we, so to speak, play within the group of friends that we have, right? You can be the one who's always trying to crack a joke in order to diffuse conflict. You can be that person who's always sarcastic. You can be the person who's always bitter, whatever it might be. But somehow we fall into these roles. And hopefully at some point in life, we decide, you know what, I don't want to be a role. I want to be a human being. Or I don't want to be a role. I don't want to be this role. I want to be a person. I don't want to exude these kind of traits. I want to exude different kind of traits. This isn't serving me. This isn't the person I want to be. What if you could choose any kind of trait? What if you could choose any kind of way? Right? So that begins with a choice. And that's the assertion of human spirit. Why? Because that goes above whatever you're feeling at this particular moment. That goes above your programming. That's called living miraculously, right? In the Hasidic sources, that's what they call that. They said that a tzaddik is involved in personal miracles all of the time. Why? Because it means going above what comes naturally to you. What's a miracle? There's a certain natural way things are run, but then God decides, hey, I'm going to turn the water into blood. Hey, I'm going to split the sea, right? So that's a miraculous, it goes beyond the laws of nature. There's a certain natural way the world works. There's something that goes beyond what comes naturally. So similarly with us, we each have a certain nature, whether it be physical desires, whether it be emotional responses or mental patterns. We have this way that comes naturally. For us, if I'm, like it says in the Talmud, Adam Olam Katan, a person is a mini world. So if you're your own world, you have a certain nature. That's how you run. Why do you run that way? Don't know. That's the way it's always been, right? That's probably, right? We could probably decipher why that's the way it's always been, but that's the way it's been as far as you can remember, right? Okay. So living miraculously means that you go ahead and choose beyond that, even though the natural thing is to respond in this way, you go ahead, extract yourself from that and choose that way. Now you do that in this moment, and then you do that in another moment, and you do that in another moment, and all of a sudden you start to build a new pathway. Now, if you want to get all psychological and whatever, you start building a new mental pathway. You have a certain highway that takes you, that this stimulus leads you into this particular path, but you start kind of like putting a dirt road up there also that takes you in another path, right? And then you keep going down that dirt road that becomes a one-lane highway. And then hopefully, if you continue down that path, continue making choices that way, now you're constructing, okay, a freeway in your brain to go in a different direction, right? We all have to do this, right? We're all recognize that anyone in your life who you respect is doing this. It's as if they woke up, it's as if they go ahead and they woke up in the morning and they're making a certain choice towards something positive. You don't respect the person who is, you you feel like you're walking around on broken glass around them. Like you have to, or walking, maybe that's not the right term, on eggshells, like you have to, because you're worried, because like if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, you look at them the wrong way, or say the right thing in the wrong tone of voice, all of a sudden they're going to explode at you, right? So sometimes we have people like that in our lives we have to tolerate, but we don't respect that, we don't admire that, we kind of like have to deal with it the way we have to kind of deal with the negative attitudes of a child. But if you respect a person, what you're respecting about them is the fact that they gained a certain aspect of mastery over themselves in their life, a certain direction, a certain choice that they made and then followed up on, right? And so this is the thing, that's the person that's always going to be the kind of person that when we're going through something and we seek out someone to take counsel with, someone to take advice from, someone to kind of give over our story to try to get some kind of insight, we're going to seek out that kind of person, right? Why? Because because it seems to us to a certain extent like they've mastered life, because they've mastered themselves, right? And so this is the beginning of spirituality, and this is the beginning of essentially personal freedom, right? And the truth is, we find that this is so at the core of really everything in Judaism that you find this is such a prerequisite for everything that you find that it's right in the beginning of the Jewish people, right? If you find like, who is the father of the Jewish people? You could type that into the chat. Got to make sure you guys are still awake. All right, maybe you're not. There we go. Thank you, Ashira. Shalom, by the way. Abraham. So good old Abe, father of the Jewish people. And so what is the first thing in the Torah? Hint, hint. It's this week's Torah portion. What's the first thing in the Torah that God says to Abe? Lech lecha me'artzecha miladatecha mibeit avicha la'aretz asher erecha, it says. Lech lecha, lech, go, lecha, to you. God says to Abe, listen, you want to be that spiritual searcher. You want to be that spiritual seeker. You want to be that searcher for truth. You want to go, lech lecha, you want to go to the reality of who you are. God says there's a prerequisite for that. I'm going to give you a 3-point plan how to get there. God says, that you'll need to leave from your land, your birthplace, and from your parents' house. Question though, aren't those often the same place? Your land, your birthplace, your parents' house. Just say your land, it includes your birthplace and your parents' house. Why does it say all three? So one of the great Hasidic masters, the son of Rabbi, the Siva Shalom, explains that these aren't just physical, it's not just talking about physical locations. Can you hear that idea? It's not just saying to leave a physical location. It's saying, gotta leave your land. Can you hear the idea that land isn't just physical land or country, but it's the atmosphere of your land, the culture, the vibe there. You got to take a step back from that value system and reevaluate. Take a step back from their definition of what's good and what's bad and reevaluate. Yeah, like I'll tell you that once I was speaking to a birthright group. How much time we got here? All right. Holy cow. We don't have that much time. Oh, we do, right. Going till 3:30. Okay. So I'll tell you one time, I was talking to, I mean, I'm used to ending on the hour. So, okay, another half hour, good. So one time I was talking to a birthright group. I speak to a lot of birthright groups when they come through here in Jerusalem. So anyway, so I'm talking to this group and I'm speaking about certain kind of ideas about like, taking a step back, about like evaluating life, and this gal afterwards comes over to me. I think it was in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. And this gal afterwards comes over to me and says to me that she was studying in college. She took a class in college, something about a class on religion in college. And she said, listen, since I didn't grow up with any religion in my life, so when I take the class in college, I'm coming to it as a clean slate. So I said to her, I knew this girl was from Florida, actually. And I said to her, okay, so let me ask you a question. Do you believe that people should be allowed to do whatever they feel like doing, whenever they feel like doing it, as long as it doesn't bother anybody else? And she said, yeah, I do, I believe that. I said, oh, okay, good. Do you feel like, do you believe that democracy is the only legitimate brand of government? She said, yeah, I believe that too. So I said, wow, that's amazing. How did I guess two important things that you believe to be true? How did I know that you believe those things to be true? And she says to me, what do you mean? It's obvious. It's natural and obvious. I said, really? Well, what if there was a Florida 20-something born and bred young lady from the year 1006? Do you think that she believed these things as well? Right? What's the point? The point is that it's what you define, what you call natural and obvious in what you call natural and obvious in 2006 is very different than what's called natural and obvious in 1006. And that's because it's not natural and obvious in 1006 and it's not natural and obvious in 2006, right? So much of what we call natural and obvious is based on the society that has raised us, the land in which we have grown up, right? So anyway, God says, leave from your land, your birthplace, and parents' house. So again, land is the concept of the atmosphere of the land, your culture. Next one, the land and your birthplace. Can you hear the idea that we all have a quote unquote place within which we were born, meaning to say that we all have certain natural predispositions, right? Not predeterminations, but predispositions. We are predisposed to respond to things in certain ways based on our nature, based on our biology, based on our chemical makeup. Okay, and there's one more, which is to leave from your land, your birthplace, and from your parents' house, right? Idea being that we are very much influenced, especially in terms of personal relationships and how we respond to things within the context of family and intimate relationships and stuff like this, based on what we saw modeled for us, based on what our parents did, not based on what they said, based on what they did, right? If your parents took you around in a car and you're listening to I don't know if you grew up in the Jewish religious world, you'll know what I'm talking about. You're listening to some song from like Uncle Moishe or something, one of these little kid jingles and Jewish jingles about like not talking trash about your friend, and then so your mom takes you around town listening to that, but then she gets home but then she's on the cell phone, being a yenta, right? Being a yapper, a town gossip, talking about everybody and their uncle. So the kid gets the message, right? The kid gets the message that, okay, this is what we say we do, and this is what we actually do, right? Because that's what brings over the message. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I saw a clip that was going around, a YouTube clip that was going around, and it was a clip from one of these late night talk shows in America. You know, these talk shows, 11, 12 at night, guy sitting behind a desk and all that, right? Anyway, this guy, he comes on, I guess, a couple of nights. No, it was the night before Halloween. He comes on and he says, I guess it was this, maybe there wasn't much to talk about. So he gives his audience an assignment and he tells them, listen, when your kids go out trick-or-treating, here's what I want you to do. When they come home from trick-or-treating and they stash their bag of candy somewhere, after they go to sleep, go ahead, take their candy, and then when they wake up the next morning and they look for the candy and they ask you where it went, tell them you ate it, record the response, and send it to us. So sure enough, you had some delinquent parents who actually did this. And a couple of days after that, they apparently put together a collage of a bunch of the different videos that parents sent in, and they showed it on the show, right? They showed it on the show. And so what you found, interestingly enough, was that pretty much all of the kids cry, but some kids are crying. One kid is crying and he's banging his fist in the table. Another kid goes over to the wall and starts banging his head against the wall. Another kid's throwing things across the room. And then there was this one other girl who sat down across from her mom and started talking about her feelings. But mom, why would you do that? Didn't you know how it would make me feel? So, of course, the audience is all cracking up, but all it takes is a minute to say, take a step back and scratch the surface a little bit and say, hold on a second. Why is it that this kid throws something against the wall, this kid knocks his head against the wall, and this kid sits down and talks about her feelings? Can you hear the idea that 90%, and you know 80% of statistics are made up, 90% of the time, that kid is doing the kid version of what they saw the parents do when something happened to the parents that they felt that they got screwed over, right? So it means to say that we're so affected by what we saw, that becomes, I once saw a quote, careful what you say to your kid. What you say to your kids will become their inner voice, right? I mean, we're so affected by what we see, especially when we're a kid, that becomes our normal. That becomes our starting point. That becomes our first nature, right? And what adulthood, what maturity, what growing up, what spirituality is about building a more refined, choice-based, self-aware, conscious, giving second nature, right? And so this is what God says to Abe. Listen, you want to go on the path of growth, spirituality, your personal potential. You got to leave from your land, your birthplace, and from your parents' house. Take a step back from your culture, from your genetic predispositions, and from those influences of your house, right? And then it's only that way that you will go to the quote unquote land that I will show you. You'll go to your personal promised land, right? And just like this is how the Jewish people start as a family with Abraham, the Jewish father of the Jewish people, the truth is the Jewish people start with the same message as a nation, right? Because if you look in the story of the Jewish people becoming a nation, you find that the Jewish people, they're in Egypt, right? And in Egypt, well, what is Egypt anyway? What is Egypt? So we know in Judaism, there's an idea that if you want to get to the essence of something, take a look at the name. In the name of the thing lies the essence of the thing. Right? And so, right, how do you say name in Hebrew? Shem, right? Same letters in Hebrew as the word sham, which means there, because in the name of the thing lies the there of the thing. So what is Mitzrayim all about? Like someone just wrote, Mitzrayim, which means Egypt, is also from the Hebrew word Meitzarim, which means boundaries, borders, constrictions, that which is holding us back, right? The word tsar means narrow. Kalolam kulo, gesher tsar meod, the whole entire world is a gesher tsar meod, a gesher tsar meod, a very narrow bridge, tsar, narrow. So Mitzrayim is from that word narrowness, what boundaries, borders, constrictions, that which is holding you back. And so there you find that the Jewish people are enslaved there. And the idea is that it wasn't just a physical servitude, it was a servitude on all levels, physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual. And then what happens? The Jewish people, they bust out of there, right? They bust out of there, and then where do they go? They bust out of Egypt and they go to the desert. And what's in the desert? Nothing, exactly. Excellent job on the text that time, on the chat. Nothing, there's nothing there. And that's the whole idea. The whole idea is that we all have our Mitzrayims in life. We all have those things that are holding us back. We all have those things that are pulling us to be a certain way and to think a certain way, right? We have our pre-programming. We have our cultural pre-programming. And the idea is, can we go ahead and bust out of our personal Egypt and go to our personal place of desert, that personal place of nothingness, of true openness, true open-mindedness, right? Not the open-mindedness of your university campus, where if you say something against what they have to say, they will destroy you. That's not the open-mindedness that I'm referring to. I'm talking about true open-mindedness, that the true capacity to get outside of yourself, to consider a different way, to consider a different path, to consider what is truth on a grand scale, and also what is truth in terms of who and what I can be within that grand scale, right? And it's only from there, it's only from that place of desert, it's specifically in the desert that the Jewish people receive the Torah, right? Because it's only to the extent that we open ourselves up and free ourselves externally and internally, especially internally, that we can truly receive a new piece of information as it was meant to be received, right? If I have not opened myself up to receiving what the Torah wants to share with me, so then what do? I take the Torah, but I'm taking it on the backdrop of all my preconceived notions. So I start editing the Torah to fit into my preconceived notions. So then I'm not receiving the Torah the way it was intended to be received. I'm slicing and dicing up the Torah to fit into my already predetermined life, right? And so the idea is, to the extent we open ourselves up, it's to that extent we're able to truly go ahead and evaluate something for what it is, right? And so this is really the beginning of growth. The beginning of spirituality means the ability to go ahead and to catch myself in certain moments and to be able to say, hold on a second. Maybe I don't want to go down this rabbit hole yet again, right? Maybe can I be something different, right? And the truth is, later on in this week's Torah portion as well, it says, God tells Abraham, Hishalech lefanai v'heyeh tamim, right? Go before me in a way of tamimut, which means wholesomeness. To be present. What does wholesomeness mean? Right? It means to be present in this particular moment, not to get lost in all these other calculations, not to get lost in all our rationales for why we might respond in one way or another, but to be able to say, what does God want from me in this particular moment? What does God want from me right now? Or if you're uncomfortable with the God thing, so hold on, let's put that aside for a second, right? Or just what is the highest level of me, right? What does that look like right now, right? What can I do right now? So just because a person treated me in a garbage way, does that mean that I have to treat them in a garbage way? So some of us like, yeah, well, God damn it, they deserve it. I'm not asking you if they deserve it. I'm asking, which by the way, you don't know because you don't know what their situation is. But let's say they deserve it, okay? But is that who you have to be? Is that who you want to be? Can you choose to be a certain way that like, okay, so they'll get something more than they deserve? Fine. Question is, why does what they're doing have to determine the type of person you're going to be, right? Like one of the great self-help gurus, Stephen Covey, famously wrote that the measure of a person is in the space that they put between stimulus and response, right? So for most people, we're operating most of the time that there is no space between stimulus and response. Someone does something, you react in a particular way. Right? Why? Why do you react in that way? So you think it's normal and natural, but you think that way because that's your programming, right? Look, notice how everything we're talking about in psychology, they have it nature versus nurture, they call it, right? But you see, God said this to Abe way back when, right? And so this is this idea of being wholesome means to be present and conscious and God conscious in the moment, right? Don't get not to get attached to the failings, the regrets, and the conceptions of what you think the past should have been, right? Not to get stuck in that, right? Because sometimes if we get stuck in the past, then we get crippled in the present, right? We're so stuck in like, oh man, I should have done this choice, should have made this, should have. And then we think that, oh, my life would have been so much better. I would have been in this place and that place. And so then now when something comes here, some opportunity comes to me now that we think is a lower level opportunity, not as big as I should have been built myself to. So then we'll just like, it's all not worth it. It's all not worth it because I screwed up 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I made this choice instead of that choice. And whatever comes to me right now, who cares, right? We start getting to that place. And so what happens? You miss out on the present because of the past. So besides the fact that you might be wrong in terms of what you think could have been and would have been and should have been, even if you were right, you're missing out on the present. I personally think that you might not be right, but that doesn't matter. Let's say you were right. You miss out on the present if you're stuck in the past. By the way, same thing. You miss out on the present if you're stuck in the future. What does stuck in the future look like? Worried about every different possibility. Worried about, oh, if I do this, so then what if it turns out the other way and then I'll have missed out on that? But you can't live like that. And so what we need to be is wholesome in the moment. What does that mean? That means that I'm comfortable with the fact that like the past already happened. I'm not changing the past. Okay, you want to tell me tshuva, this and that. Okay, besides that, I'm not getting into spiritual conversation here. Let's keep it psychological for a second, right? The past is written in stone. The past was. But what does it mean written in stone? It means that I'm not changing it. It's not here right now. Therefore it's not relevant. I have no control over it. So therefore there's a certain level of I'm detached from it. Also the future is not here right now, right? The future is not here right now. So as far as I'm concerned in this moment, it doesn't exist. What was that? Yesterday's history. Tomorrow's a mystery. Today's is a gift, and that's why we call it the present. Oh, damn, that's good. Okay, good one. So when we can say that, when we can stay in this moment and say, okay, what does God want from me to do this moment? Or what do I want to do? What kind of person do I want to be in this moment? Do I want to be a person who reacts with anger? Do I want to be a person who curls up in a little ball every time someone says something negative about me? Do I want to be a person who's nasty? Do I want to be a person, right? Or do I want to respond with the godly traits of compassion, right? With all-encompassing love, which means that even if negativity comes my way, just let it wash over me, right? And many times we should recognize, the more we do this, by the way, the more we recognize that when people are negative or have something going on, it has so much more to do with them and their past wounds and their past pain and their quote unquote triggers and all that kind of stuff. And it's so much more about them and it really isn't so much about us. And so, oh, well, they should take responsibility. But okay, maybe not. I don't know. Point is, why does that have to determine who I'm going to be? Right? And so when we get to this place, we're so much more independent. We're so much more refined. We're just operating on a higher level. We're operating beyond whatever our pre-programming was, right? And now you're in the driver's seat of yourself. And so instead of your midot, your attributes and your emotions, acting on you, you become the one who's running the show over them. You decide which midot you use, as opposed to your midot just coming out, right? You ever heard anyone say, I'm angry? You heard anyone say, maybe you said that, I'm angry. Right? When my kids do that, I have to be an annoying father and I'd be like, really? Because I named you Sarah. It's an annoying father joke, right? But what's the point of that though? The point of that is to recognize that you're not angry. Now, you might have a feeling of anger coming up for you. Try that one with an 8-year-old, guys. But you're not angry, but there's a big difference there. There's a big difference between I'm angry versus the feeling of anger is coming up for me. There's a massive, massive difference. Are you identifying by this trait? Is that you? Or is it something that, like, you have many traits and this one happens to be coming up for you right now because of something that happened? That's healthy. But when you say I'm angry, you lost yourself. You see what I'm saying? And so you're not free and not being spiritual in that moment. You're now a prisoner, like someone said at the beginning. Someone said at the beginning, I forget where that was, I don't know, chat, whatever. But that you're a slave to that programming, you're a slave to that feeling, right? So anyway, this is the beginning of spirituality, is to be able to do it, right? So people think, so now, people think spirituality, like I'm going to get some messages, I'm going to get some inclination, I'm going to get a sixth sense, I'm going to have that eye on my forehead, right? And I'm going to like go on some, feel my way to wherever I'm supposed to go. So the thing is though, yes, that exists. There's such a thing like that. But you have to work out that muscle and make it strong in order for that to happen. You got to work out your soul in order for your soul to actually start giving you certain, what's the word? Not instinct, not inclination, something with an I, but intuition. That's the word I'm looking for. So to give you that sixth sense or whatever it might be, you have to be holding there. So if all you're ever holding in is your gut response, so then guess what? What's coming up for you is your gut response that's rooted in the crappy programming that you've been acting upon for the last 20, 30 years. Do you hear what I'm saying? Right? So yes, that exists, but that's what I'm saying to you. That's why I'm saying to you that this is about first, this is the beginning of spirituality. That's what I'm saying to you, right? And then you see where that takes you, but you develop yourself. Self means the stuff we're talking about here. Because if we don't, then we're just operating on stuff that's not ourself. And we're identifying by those things that are attributes that have been put in us from when we're a kid. It's from our nature, our nurture, all that stuff that's been put into us. We're just been operating like that. We haven't gotten outside of ourselves for a second to actually use some personal choice and determination in order to determine who, choosing a higher, more godly, more refined path, right? We start doing that, and then we see where that takes us. So, my friends, thoughts, questions, ideas. We have a few minutes left, if anybody has. Go ahead. Chat me up. There you go. awaiting a chat. Till then, we call them awaiting a chat here. Awaiting. Uh-oh. Okay, I'm here. Good. Awaiting a chat. All right, listen. If there's no chats, there's no chats. If there's no chats. Oh, you can get unmuted as well. Tov, beseder. I guess we're calling it here. My friends, I hope this is helpful. I hope this is meaningful. And you're very welcome. Thank you for having me. And I hope to see you all again next week, God willing. Hopefully we'll do this again. I think that's the plan. There you go. Got the BH from the Lighthouse. Okay, cool. So my friends, have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Oh, if anyone is interested in being in contact, you're welcome to send me an email at elithejew@gmail.com. Also, if you want to join, I have a Hasidut Daily WhatsApp group. There you go. Thank you for posting that. Hasidut Daily we have a WhatsApp group, a little 2 minutes burst of inspiration pretty much every day from yours truly. If you want to be put on that, just send me your number in the email to the email address, and I will add it to the WhatsApp group. Good times, my friends. Peace and love. Keep rocking.